Under the floor is yours.
All right. All right, so the Human Rights and Equity Commission on March 27th is called to order. I have hybrid meeting is called to order at 4:30, looks like exactly. I'd like to remind all of us that throughout the meeting to announce your name before making comments for accessibility to everyone. And please identify who, for people who are not viewing a monitor or who can't see or anyone not viewing the screen, so please just a short description of yourself so you can be identified without a picture. So let's begin with roll call of the commissioners and we'll encourage each member to do that self-description thing. Okay, so Cameron.
Present. Oh, and you want me to do description?
Yeah, just a short description.
Is it on? Yeah, okay. Cameron Fisher, wearing a striped white and blue striped shirt, shoulder length, wavy auburn hair, and I'm white, and I guess that's it.
Thank you. And Carly.
Present. I'm a white woman with short dark hair, glasses, and blue shirt.
Thank you so much. And Carolyn.
Carolyn Peacock Biggs, Black female with a red blazer.
Okay, and Christopher.
Christopher has sent an email to our staff this yesterday stating that he is resigning from ATREC due to the situation that happened last meeting. So
Okay. And Jackie.
Present, long brown hair and a gray long sleeve shirt with a white shawl thingy over it.
Okay, so thank you. And Jasmine. See Jasmine.
She online?
she is not online.
Okay, and Jeff.
Jeff Kitchens, white male, short brown hair, blue button-up shirt. Pronouns he, him.
Thank you so much. And my name is Linda Long, pronoun is she, her. I have a head full of curly hair and I'm wearing very large piece earrings on purpose. And I am present. Nancy?
Nancy is absent.
Absent. Okay. And before our land acknowledgement, I would like to steal 1 second to 2 seconds to say, take advantage of the chair I'm sitting in and say, give our sincere thanks to the city of Bend and to the equity department and others who are working so very hard to create a safe place for us to talk about the hard things that we need to talk about. And right now we'll move on to the land acknowledgement. Do I have a volunteer? No one's crashing down their microphone.
Okay, I'll do it. Cameron Fisher, she, her. We would like to acknowledge that the beautiful land known as Bend, Oregon, north of the Columbia River, is the original homeland of the Confederate Tribes of Warm Springs. The Confederate tribes ceded this land in the Treaty of 1855 while retaining regular and customary hunting, fishing, and gathering rights. The Wanalama, Warm Springs, Wasco, and Northern Paiute people inhabited this area in certain seasonal times that clearly established their presence. It is also important to note that the Klamath Trail ran north through this region to Great Celilo Falls trading grounds. This trade route expanded the impact of commerce between tribal nations. We acknowledge and thank the original stewards of this land. It is our hope that guests continue to honor and care for this land.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to read it in Spanish because we want everyone to be included. So I'm going to read in Spanish. Queremos reconocer que las tierras bellas que ahora se llaman Bend, Oregon, al norte del río Columbia, son las tierras originarias de las tribus confederadas de Warm Springs. Las tribus confederadas cedieron estas tierras en el Tratado de 1855, conservando derechos de cacería, pesca y recogida regulares y habituales. Los pueblos Guanalama, Warm Springs, Wasco y Payote, Notañu habitaron esta área durante ciertas temporadas y claramente establecieron su presencia. También es importante notar que el sendero Klamath recorría al norte de esta región hasta los campos de comercio en Celelio Falls. Esta ruta de intercambio expandió el impacto de comercio entre naciones federales. Reconocemos y agradecemos a los guardianes y guardianes originales de estas tierras. Es nuestro deseo que continuemos honrando y cuidándolas. Next, we will have a minutes approval for the March 27th meeting. Are there any corrections to the March 27th meeting? Corrections?
Yes, I'd like to make a request. No, but where's
The minutes.
On, let's see, I have them pulled up. I don't remember where it's at, but on the note where it mentions the 10-minute break, it uses the term to calm down. And I was hoping we could maybe change that to just a 10-minute break, or if we need to say some kind of description, just a 10 minutes to process or.
I think that's an excellent idea, and I need to second that. If you have to do that.
Yeah. In the script I gave Linda, it talks about going through the process of the vote and then the amending of the vote. And there wasn't a to amend the minutes are there, so we'll go ahead and amend those.
Okay, so then motion to approve the March 27th minutes with those changes?
I
Okay.
move to approve the March 27th minutes with the amendment provided by Jackie Curry.
Okay,
This is Carly, I'll second.
okay. So approval of the March 27th, 2024 draft minutes from the rest of the commissioners. Correct?
Aye.
And I will announce the motion to approve, which was, I guess, and it was seconded, and the motion was unanimously approved. Okay, and now we will move on to public comment. We are going to, these comments will be write-in only. And City of Bend staff will read the responses we received.
Perfect, thank you. My name is Andres Portela, Equity and Inclusion Director for the City of Bend, pronouns he, him. Visual description, I'm a Black man with curly black hair, wearing a blue sweater with a shirt underneath. We received a lot of community support, and I felt that in the moment that would be probably something we should really hear from community and all the. Let me take a step back. Last meeting, we had targeted hate spoken into this space as each one of us reached out to my staff, all of us reached out to each other and tried to provide as much care as we possibly could. We learned a lot of lessons as a city staff on how do we create a space that is psychologically, emotionally safe. I know I say that all the time, but it was really proof in the pudding. And how do we create better space for y'all in your experience with this? Because you're volunteers and you deserve better than what was presented by those folks who wanted to come in and cause harm and confusion. And so In this moment, I felt like it would be perfect for us to address that it happened and the things we're gonna do to recidivate that. But then also for us to hear from some community members who wanted to say, hey, we actually support the work that ATREC is doing. We opened public comment up to everyone and said, if you have something to submit something. And luckily, we only got messages of love and kindness. And so I'm gonna read some of those. I will start with the ones one that I shared from you from Counselor Riley. As a city councilor, I want you to know how much I appreciate you and value the work you do for our community to make our community safer, more welcoming, and more just. It is essential and much needed. Thank you for your decision in partnership with council and city staff. I heard about the ugly start to your meeting and I watched the video today. It must have felt difficult to sit through hate and deeply disturbing comments made during public comment. My stomach turns that people will still see the world and that they're in that way and they are willing to treat their fellow humans so poorly. As Commissioner Wilder said, it's a good reminder of the reality of the world we live in and work in and why this work is so important. I want you to know that I will be asking staff to consider providing more technical support at your meetings to help manage similar situations in the future and to help clarify the legality of cutting people off. Unfortunately, as Commissioner Fisher said, I believe that there is a good chance we will see more of this type behavior coming in the future, and that ATREC is likely to be the focus of it. We will be fully equipped. Thank you again for your community service. The next few are going to come from community. This is from Cassie Worthington. I wanted to write and show my support for the Human Rights and Equity Commission. As a private citizen, I show my support of this commission, and I am proud that the city supports human rights and equity. I value your time and commitment and believe it is truly essential in our community. What happened at your last meeting was appalling, abhorrent, and disgrace to the entire community. I want to make it clear that what occurred does not represent the community as a whole. I will attend the upcoming ATREC meeting in person and show my support and make myself available to support in the future. Thank you for your time and commitment to the city of Bend. Okay. Sorry, I have a lot of these up. I will say there was probably about 50 or 60 of them, just all showing love and support. I am only going to read 5. This one's from Jess Bomichman. I'm probably butchered that. I'm so sorry. I was very upset to find that the last Bend ATREC meeting was interrupted by anonymous racist commenters, which only goes to show how desperately we as a community need your work. I know that y'all understand the inequities that many Bend residents have to deal with on a daily basis, and it is horrible that you had to experience this harmful behavior while trying to get meaningful work done. I don't know what I can do to support the team or y'all, besides let you know that I am in your circle of friends in Bend, standing behind you all in solidarity. That is this is from Lorena. I am not sure how I can assist, but I would like to help bringing restorative practices to this situation. I will continue to show up at meetings and I hope to be a part of the group soon. So that was her comment. And then I think there's one more. This one's from Renee Goin. It says, I was sad to hear about the March 2024 meeting of ATREC. Some people decided to say harmful things towards ATREC commissioners. I'm writing you today to thank you for your important work. It is important to me as a community member of Bend, Oregon. I received the ATREC meeting from February of 2024, and I will continue to support your goals. I deeply appreciate your time and input into these important changes that are going to happen in our city. I have the next meeting on my calendar and hope to attend and support in person. So as I stated, that was the love and support that was given to us from community members. I read 5 of the 30. Thank you for entertaining me reading them. I felt it was extremely important for us to know that folks are actually standing behind us and we can move forward with the meeting.
That's special. I'd like to say, thank you to our community for that, sincerely, for that, overwhelming support. It's extremely, the level of support that we received is just so encouraging and appreciated. What we saw last month is not the norm here in Bend. And we will refuse at every step and work to not have that be the norm. The norm in Bend is kind and nice. It's the way it's been since I've looked at it, and that's what we want the norm to be. So thank you. And so on to HREC elections. We have a slide to read. Okay, I can see that just fine. So we'll run through these 6 points. Are there more than 6? A lot. Then let's do it fast because everybody else can read too in the room, I'm sure. So we'll preside, the chair will preside at all official meetings, consult with the city staff liaison in drafting the meeting agenda, ensure meetings are conducted in an orderly, focused, efficient, and fair manner. Lead HREC meetings and facilitate commission decision-making, encouraging all members to participate and voice their ideas. Along with city staff liaison, the chair will act as the primary spokesperson for HREC, for presenting to the city council, boards, commissions, media, outside agencies, or may delegate to another HREC member. Prepare documents and correspondence, or delegate and approve before distributing. And lastly, delegate tasks to other HREC members as appropriate. All right. So I think we can go to the next slide, and then I believe, Andres, you will ask, or I suppose I could, Commissioner Kitchens to, if you would like to still serve as our chair, and if you have any comments.
Yes, I would like to. Before saying anything, I think it's important that we open up if there's anyone wishing to be nominated for either chair or what's the second position? Chair.
Vice chair.
What's that?
Vice chair.
Vice chair. So if we have any others that are interested in chair or vice chair, I think it's important to offer that up.
I think that you're exactly right. It wasn't in my notes and I missed it, but I'm kind of new at it. It's been a while for me. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Do we have any other nominations? And do we have any nominations for vice chair?
I would like to nominate Carolyn Peacock Biggs as co-chair. Or, yeah, co-chair with Jeff.
Thank you so much.
Second. You beat me to it.
So would you like to take the floor and make some comments? Say.
Do we have to vote? Shouldn't we do it?
Do we do need to
to
vote?
So let's
Or
vote on
Or
the
after.
chair position, and then we can go through the description of the vice chair position.
Okay, so let's vote on the chair, on the vice chair position.
Chair.
Correct, the chair position.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not lost or anything, Chris.
Doing good.
I'm a stand-in, all right, so. Okay, so let's vote on the chair then.
So you need to
Anyone
you
in
need a motion.
favor, so we make a motion to vote, that Commissioner Jeff Kitchens, becomes, chair of our HREC committee.
Carolyn Peacock Biggs, she, her. I second that motion that Jeff becomes our chair for March 2024 and March 2025.
Okay. So I think I can call then the votes at this
Chair.
point.
Okay, vote of chair.
Just stay here, one.
This is Cassandra. May I ask a point of clarification?
Yeah.
Are we looking for Commissioners Kitchen and Commissioners Peacock Biggs to share as co-chairs in the role with an additional position of vice chair? Is that what the motion is that is currently on the floor? Or is it a request for a chair position and a vice chair position with chair and being Commissioner Kitchens and vice chair being Commissioner Peacock Biggs? Just a point of clarification.
Yes.
So as far as I understand it, Jeff, Commissioner Kitchens would be chair and and we need a vice chair, not necessarily a co-chair, as far as I understand it.
Okay.
This is Cassandra. If I
So-
could just, if a clarification for Commissioner Fisher's nomination, and I think that will elucidate what we need to look for.
Okay,
I've seen different ways of doing this, but I would suggest co-chair and not having a vice chair, having Carolyn and Jeff as co-chairs.
what would be the difference in the two roles? Would there be one, or is it just a title?
Please come in.
I'm only here just in case I can contribute. So I don't mean to interrupt the discussion. But I will say there are generally applicable code provisions in our code that apply to all advisory bodies, and I haven't pulled them up, but they do contain a provision that essentially says each group elects a chair and a vice chair. So that's, I understand the discussion. I think it's a good one. We have kind of I'd say a traditional framework that the code calls for. Because of that, I think it's important to have a chair and a vice chair. Now, how the group decides those roles are going to work and how the group decides whether those roles are going to be more of a responsibility sharing structure rather than just sort of a number one and a number two. I think there is some flexibility for this group to decide how those roles are going to work together, and maybe they will look more like co-chairs, but I do think it's important to have somebody who's at least nominally the chair and somebody who's nominally the co-chair.
Okay, so it sounds like we're gonna go with the original language of chair and vice chair.
Okay.
So would the motion be clarified well enough at this point, or should we repeat it?
Let's repeat it.
Okay. So I would call for someone to make a motion to elect Commissioner Kitchens as chair and Caroline as vice chair. And call for a second.
Second.
Okay. Okay, and so we can call for a vote at this point. Correct? For Commissioner Kitchens to take the chair and Caroline to take the vice chair. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. And then so that's over. I haven't practiced Robert's Rules of Order for a while. Okay, so we read that. Do we need to go through the rest of that? I don't think so.
Linda, I'll just, if we can just take a moment just to share a couple of thoughts, I'll share a couple of thoughts.
Yeah.
You wanna share a couple of thoughts as well? I'm putting you on the spot again.
It's okay. It's okay.
Would you like to go first? Or do you want me to go first?
You go first.
Okay.
Chair.
So, first, I just wanted to say it's an honor to be a part of this commission, and it is an honor to serve and support our city. I also wanted to say a big thank you to our city, to our city council, and our mayor, to our city employees and all of the departments, and especially the Equity and Inclusion Department. In becoming chair this month, on the heels of last month's meeting, I wanted to just highlight something that I think is really important for all here today to hear. What happened last month is, in my mind, very much indicative of why we sit here and why we need to sit here, why there needs to be a Human Rights and Equity Commission. and why we need, excuse me, to be a voice. So that a voice that can speak for all and all that wish to see positive change in our city and our community. This is a wonderful community, and every community, no matter how wonderful, can see the benefit of change and support in what we do here as a commission. And I also wanted to share that I believe we carry a legacy on our shoulders, and that is a legacy for change. We support the vision for Bend, and that is a vision that has been put forth by our city council and our city government and our mayor. And I believe that that vision is very much a wish and a promise to make our community one that will be welcoming, open, inclusive, and safe for everyone. So thank you very much for the opportunity to serve as the chair for HREC.
That was beautiful. I actually don't have anything written. However, I got dressed today. Well, let me start over. Carolyn Peacock Biggs, she, her. I was here last month, and it was rough. It was rough being present today. And I decided, I was like, you don't get to change the trajectory of what I want to do with the city. You don't get to do that. So I went home and I put my red jacket on. And I felt really good because something about red makes you feel like you can do a few things, maybe like your invisible cape. But with that being said, this is my second term. And it's an honor to serve this city. And we've been faithful. You know, we're volunteers, but we have been very faithful. We've made a lot of changes in the last 2, 3, I don't know how long this has been available, but we've made a lot of the changes in this city, positive, good ones. And I'm grateful to be a part of that. And I look forward to seeing what we can do as the city from March 2024 to March 2025. If you ever feel like you can't do something or something scares you, put on a red jacket. It'll help you.
I am so excited. I think this is going to be great. I think we have a great team, a great commission, and everybody is so excited to get back to work, get focused, and really begin to grow and invent an environment in Bend where we can all be safe. And not only safe, but actually also thrive. It's a beautiful place, beautiful, with tons of beautiful people in it. And fully capable of creating a nice and kind Bend. So at the start of the next meeting, Commissioner Kitchens and now Chair Kitchens and Vice Chair Carolyn Briggs will send us down the river with pretty good paddles. Pretty good paddle. So let's move on. Number 6, we are going to talk with Melissa Camania. Did I pronounce her correctly? She is the Affordable Housing Coordinator for Bend. And we're really, really excited to talk to her because, wow, like, who doesn't understand that affordable housing is an equity issue and inclusion issue. So thank you, Melissa. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Melissa Camania. You pronounced it correctly. Thank you.
From Minneapolis.
Thank you. I'm here. I'm the Affordable Housing Coordinator here at the City of Bend. And Carolyn, I wish I could borrow your red jacket. But my name is Melissa. I am a white woman with brown hair filled with sparkles of white as I advance in my years. And I'm here to talk to you about some work that we did called the Analysis of Impediments to Fair Housing. Just a little bit of background on this work. The City of Bend receives funds every year from HUD, and we The funding is called the Community Development Block Grant Fund. And as a requirement for receiving that funding, we, every 5 years, do what's called an analysis of impediments to fair housing. This all started way back when in 1968, when the Fair Housing Act was established. The purpose of it is to assess our community and look for discriminatory practices. So we look at lots and lots of data, we identify impediments through community outreach, make appropriate recommendations. This was completed in Bend in 2012 and again in 2019 and now 2024. Some history about Bend. I'm not sure how much of this is news to you all, but there's a lot of history that's not well known about Bend. In 1926, that is when the Oregon Constitution was amended. Previously to that, African Americans were not allowed to live in Oregon. Despite the Constitution being amended, practices still continued in Bend. Case in point, there were laws and practices that prohibited African Americans, Chinese, and Japanese from owning real estate. And the city of Bend was made aware this year through the work of Ricardo Waits with the Central Oregon Black Leaders Assembly that there are racially restrictive covenants in Bend. Before he brought this to our attention, it was widely assumed that that did not happen here. And there is a neighborhood in Bend where in 1911, racially restrictive covenants were put on properties that state that if you're Japanese or Chinese, you cannot own that land through the year 2000. It was not enforceable after the Fair Housing Act, but it is important to understand our history to be able to make changes for the future. Bend's mayor in 1922 and 23 was a registered member of the Ku Klux Klan. And as recently as 1943, Bend City Council required racially separate quarters during World War II training. Now we are in 2010, moving forward to 2010, the city code adapted a chapter on equal rights, which prohibited those types of discriminations. So I mentioned community input. This is almost like, I liken this process to almost like having a baby. This was 10 months of being in the community, looking at data and pulling it all together. So of that 10 months, 6 months was active community engagement. We were at public events, open houses, we consulted with agencies and distributed a fair housing survey. All in all, I heard from about 350 community members through a survey and about 300 people in face-to-face interviews. And what I heard overwhelmingly fell into 3 buckets. Number one, residents reported to us that they had difficulty working with property management companies to address their housing needs. We also heard that there are limited housing and infrastructure in place for persons living with disabilities. And we heard about substandard living conditions. We looked at Bend data and how we were able to digest that as we looked not just at one point in time. So we didn't just look in the bucket at what's going on today. We looked at trends over the last 5 years, specifically with race, ethnicity, persons with disabilities, income, poverty, employment, and housing. And we looked by census tract. And the reason that we did that is to identify, are there parts of town where there is more concentration of persons than others? Are we having areas of concentration forming? We also looked at local and public data, such things as lending data that's publicly published, school enrollments to identify pockets of concentration. And then we looked at something called access to social mobility. And this is the idea that we want our children to do better or go further or have more access in life than what we had. And our grandparents wanted that for us. There are things that limit that, and we looked at those factors in Bend as well. Okay, all of that now coming together, we identified some impediments to fair housing, and I'm going to just go through these briefly with you. The first one is that we identified that portions of Bend have concentrations of poverty and other factors that limit that social mobility. And so this little chart that you see here, we highlighted census tracts that have more than one concentration. I do want you to know not all concentrations are bad. Some concentrations are actually helpful for building community where you have safety in certain types of communities. But we did identify 4 census tracts that have concentrations. And so our recommendations are, of course, let's prioritize our services and community investment in those areas. We will evaluate city projects for impacts on our protected classes in those areas. We also know that if we can balance housing, we can balance these tracts by increasing housing supply in the tracts that don't have concentration. So more housing choice means you can move, you can find another place to be. And then also we'd like to create support systems for low-income families that move into high social mobility areas. That's a long sentence, but really what that means. Studies have shown that if we just provide housing in a high-income area, that's not enough for a family to succeed. There needs to be supports for social support, school supports, all of that. So we're going to look at that. The second impediment that we identified is that Bend-specific fair housing data is limited and inaccessible. So a lot of the data that we have to pull from is from the US government, and it zooms out to Deschutes County, and it's in the past, and a lot of these are voluntary participation. And so if you are not trusting of the government, or you just don't understand what the survey is, you may not participate. So we don't have full participation or Bend-specific data. So we're going to work on that. We're creating workflows to analyze data, platforms to share it, and we also know, like, I think about it like the table. The city has this influence on just this table. There are nonprofits that gather data that we would like to have, but it's not within our control or in our table to have. So we'd like to establish partnerships to be able to share in that data and make protocol for that. Our third impediment is regarding persons with disabilities. We want to, number one, increase the number of fully accessible dwelling units in Bend. And all of our partners in the community are making efforts in this way, but I just want to give Carly a little whoop whoop, because Habitat for Humanity is, and all the projects that are in the queue, with city funding, have accessible units. So I thank you for that. We're also looking at, we've heard from our developers that it costs more money to build accessibly because of square footage and fixtures and other things. So we're looking at creating funding opportunities to offset those costs. And we're looking at areas with infrastructure that limit walkability or rollability for persons with disabilities. Are you still with me?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I know it's a
Hanging on every
lot.
word.
It's a lot. Our fourth impediment is that additional fair housing enforcement and education is needed. This is our heaviest recommendation because this is really the majority of what we heard. We hear from residents of all over Bend that when they have issues, they just can't get them addressed. So the first thing we're looking at is how do we increase developer accountability for how their property management companies are handling fair housing complaints? We don't know, but we're looking at that. We also plan to share fair housing data, trends, and community inputs with our developers. If as a developer, you don't know what's going on in your area, you don't understand the trends in the community, you can't make decisions appropriately. So we plan to establish ways to share that. We're going to continue sharing, engaging the community with fair housing trainings, collaboration on how to request accommodations, look at our policy language, and then remember I mentioned the racially restrictive covenants in Central Oregon. We're just looking at policies and ideas for how we can identify. We don't know how many other properties there are that have that. We just know about that one right now. And lastly, racial disparities exist in lending and funding practices and policies. So mortgage data is publicly released, and it's not easy to navigate, but you can look at lending data to find out who's being approved, what are they being approved for. And when we looked at that in a pretty deep analysis, we did identify that there are disparities. Access to funding, interest rates, and even like why people are rejected is not the same depending on what race is on your application. So we are looking at systems to analyze and evaluate Bend-specific data. We are looking at down payment assistance funds for protected classes, and then we're going to talk to local partners who are experts to help our community members navigate the lending process. Next steps, I took our analysis to City Council. Gosh, it feels like a year ago, but it wasn't that long ago. And council has asked us to report on our progress on a regular basis. So at this time, our document is still under final review processes, but as soon as it is released, the clock starts and we get to start on all the work. And with that, I do want to stop and take a breath, and I am available to answer your questions. If there are any.
Carolyn Peacock Biggs, she, her. One of the, it was called an impediment as it relates to participation. And for the sake of most people of color, we're not quick to go and have a conversation and put plans together because we're not that trusting. So how could we, as a city, create an environment that would be more inviting to people who have a tendency to not feel safe to even address the fact that they have needs and what they might be?
Yeah, that is a really great question. I'm glad you brought that up. Established trust is the cornerstone to this work. If we don't have the trust, we don't hear what's happening. If we don't hear what's happening, we can't address it. And these are really difficult things to talk about. They're difficult to hear, but they're mostly difficult to have the space and the energy and the time to talk about what has happened to you. And so it's the goal of our department and in this work to continue to engage with community groups to build that trust. And it takes time. And it means we show up and we have more and more spaces. Bigger story for the city, I can't answer that. But for our department, yes, I wholeheartedly agree. That's the cornerstone of being able to advance this work, is just building on those relationships and proving transparency and reporting the work and where we're going.
I would love to see more outreach for the homeless, and in particular, the people. There is a unique part of the homeless community who actually prefer it. Actually prefer that life, and for whatever reasons they decide that that's the case. How do we as far as I see, the best way to engage that large part of the homeless community is to begin to provide alternatives to standardized normal, quote unquote, normal housing options, right? So how can we increase alternative community building activities, like, for example, tiny house villages, alternative spaces in terms of sheltering people, and how can we, reach out to that portion of the homeless community who doesn't want to be reached out to? That is probably for me one of the highest hanging fruits, and it actually involves a cultural change and a real public outreach process and effort. How is that incorporated into your plan, or can it be?
That's a good question too. Currently, the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee works with service providers in the community that provide services to our homeless neighbors. And so there's like the cart and the horse. For us to be able to increase units or increase services, we need more providers, more service providers. And so the city and our affordable housing team work with nearly all of the providers in the community. And we recognize that there is a need for more. We actually have in the housing department 2 specialists who focus on houselessness alone, and they are deeply embedded in the community as well. And so certainly that is a large thought that everyone in our department has on how to reach all of the population. I can assure you that there are systems in place and there are people in place doing that. And I invite HREC and community members to come to our Affordable Housing Committee meetings. Because then we have regular updates about the work that the city is doing with our houseless population and with our service partners. It's a great way to have some visibility of the work that's being done.
I would love to do that. And I would also like to make one more short, tiny little question that you don't really have to answer, but I would love for us to start thinking about, which is how to talk about NIMBYism here in Bend. Not in anywhere, but not in my backyard. How do we begin to sort of change the conversation and change the cultural and social structure of Bend that really really has a lot to do, even more so than zoning, with keeping out keeping certain kinds of people and certain people with certain circumstances in certain places in the community. That's a matter, I think, of changing the public discourse, the public conversation. As you go forward and as we go forward, I'd like to see if we can talk a little bit about how do we bring this to the communities who aren't hopeless, who are just, yeah, do it, but not here. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Oh, yes.
Carly Colgan, She-Her. I'm curious if you could talk some about the substandard housing and what's happening with that, and also in your outreach, were you able to collect any data on what that looks like?
Yes. So in our community outreach, there was a photograph that I shared of a burned outlet that was submitted by a community member of having electrical fires on their property, not being able to get them fixed. They actually had half of their house in the winter had no electricity. Issues like that. Other folks have reported challenges of having accessibility needs and not having an accessible unit to live in, and causing damage to the property or to themselves, really feeling at risk for safety. We also heard just property management companies have had a lot of turnover and shortage of staff. And so I think with the recovery of the economy after COVID, there still is a little bit of a gap. And so substandard living conditions can be anything from your heat doesn't work to an electrical fire. And we heard pretty much all of it. And then your second part of your question, sorry, I forgot.
Were you able to collect any data from what you've heard?
Yes, we do have data. It is zoomed out a little bit to protect the identity of folks that have reported that. And more information is included in our full document that's just like on the heels of coming out.
Yeah, Jeff Kitchens, he, him. I guess my question would be, Melissa, the great information, and it sounds like this is an ongoing effort, and there is the accessible or the Affordable Housing Committee. What can HREC do to help support? I guess that's really my question. A lot of good information, uncertain of what next steps we can help support or provide any input on, or et cetera.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. How much time do we have? Coming to our Affordable Housing Committee meetings is a great first step. I have a dream that we are partners in this together. And whether that's one HREC commissioner comes at each meeting just to hear and report back, I'm not sure how you would divide that up, or if you're interested in that, but the invitation is always open. And then as we continue with our outreach, let's stay in communication. And if we can do the outreach together and establish those trusts together, yes, please. And ask us questions, check in with us, invite us to come and talk about the progress of the work, keep us accountable and transparent.
Could you please forward the slides to Andres and then he could send them to us?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any last questions? Well, thank you so much for your time and for your thoughtful and intentional questions. I very much appreciate your time.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
Okay, and by the way, this is Linda, the curly head and the thing, and I'm the only one, even though I was the one that asked everybody to say their names and their pronouns, I am the only one who hasn't. So the only one who hasn't, I'm Linda. So moving on, Emily Hammond. From the Fair Housing Council of Central Oregon would like to speak with us. Is she here? Or
She
online?
is online.
Hi there, everybody. It looks like I can't start my video or, oh, now I can share my screen. Here we go. All right, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Lovely. Thank you all so much for having me today. My name is Emily Hammond. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator for the Fair Housing Council of Oregon. I'm really glad to be here with you all, although virtually. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. See here. Okay, so I feel like some of this is probably going to be a bit of overlap from what Melissa talked about because we are talking about fair housing. But I'll talk a little bit about the Fair Housing Council of Oregon. We were formed in 1990, so it's been fighting for housing justice for almost 34 years. This month is the anniversary of the Fair Housing Month or of the Fair Housing Act getting signed in 1968, like Melissa mentioned. So we were celebrating the 56th anniversary, which is very exciting. I actually have an event coming up on Saturday that's in collaboration with the Central Oregon Veterans Ranch. And we're talking about fair housing topics there as well. We're having a chili cook-off. It's going to be a good time if anybody's available and wants to come join. So the Fair Housing Council of Oregon is a statewide civil rights nonprofit, and our intention and mission is to proactively promote housing justice, equity, and inclusion. We have regional staff all around the state of Oregon, and I am your Central Oregon representative. Our mission is to end illegal housing discrimination and promote equal access to housing choice through education and enforcement of fair housing law. And I'm going to talk about how we accomplish that or strive to do that in just a little bit here. So Melissa touched on this, but fair housing laws are civil rights laws that promote equal access to housing. So they promote people from discrimination in housing and make it illegal for housing providers to discriminate against certain groups. It is different than than landlord-tenant law, because landlord-tenant law covers things like maybe what can be a part of lease agreement, how evictions can be handled, and how work orders can be completed, how applications are screened, things like that. For housing law comes into play when someone is being treated differently in any of those sorts of housing activities or transactions because of their protected class identity, which I'll go over in just a moment. So the Fair Housing Act applies to dwellings, and HUD gives specific guidance around this because maybe my definition of a dwelling may be different than your definition. So HUD defines dwellings as houses, apartments, condos, and floating homes, mobile homes, retirement housing, nonprofit housing, and shelters, and then possibly motel rooms, depending on the length of stay. We got a lot of questions around short-term rentals, and this can be kind of a sticky area because we really want to focus on the intention of the housing that somebody is in. So if somebody is only living there for a short time, but they're considering it as their only dwelling, then this could fall under the Fair Housing Act, but this can get a little sticky and really depends on the judge in a situation where it goes to court. So what is fair housing? It is the right of all people to be free from illegal discrimination in the rental, sale, or financing of housing, which is upheld under these fair housing laws. So when someone receives differential treatment because of who they are or their protected class identity, then this is where the Fair Housing Council of Oregon's enforcement team can get involved, as well as other organizations. So what are protected classes? I'm going to tell a little bit of the history of when these groups became protected. Through the civil rights movement had been in motion, or though the civil rights movement had been in motion for many years, it was 1 week after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that President Lyndon B. Johnson signed into law the 1968 Fair Housing Act. The Fair Housing Act initially included race, color, national origin, and religion as the 4 federally protected classes. Around the same time that the civil rights movement was at its height, the women's rights movement was making itself known. And as a result, in 1974, sex was also added as a protected class under fair housing law. So this meant that, for example, that housing providers could no longer deny the sale or rental of a home to a woman due to discriminatory assumptions like maybe feared that she wouldn't keep up the mowing of her lawn or something silly like that. Since then, additional groups have been added under the protected classes of sex, so this includes sexual orientation, gender identity, and also survivors of domestic violence. In the 1980s, familial status was also added to the Fair Housing Act as a protected class. And up until 1987, any landlord or housing provider in the US could deny the rental, lease, or sale of housing to families with children under the age of 18. So here in Oregon, nearly 70% of rental properties did not allow children. We also added to the Fair Housing Act in the 1980s, the protected class of people with disabilities. So as with the civil rights movement and the women's rights movement, the independent living movement was a leading force in this change. So before, many people with disabilities lived in group homes, segregated from the rest of society. And in the 1970s and 1980s, when people with disabilities began to look for new homes or places that they could live independently, they found that discrimination was a really huge barrier in the housing and rental market. And not all states have this, but Oregon has some additional protected classes. So we have marital status. So it doesn't matter if you're single, separated, divorced, or married. These factors should not come into question during your housing transaction. We also have source of income. Excuse me. So if an individual is receiving a Section 8 voucher of any kind, or any sort of local, state, or federal housing assistance, that must be considered a source of income. And while temporary assistance for needy families, supplemental security income, and Social Security disability insurance are not explicitly written into the protected class, the legislative intent was to include these. And there are cases where someone who was discriminated against because of these benefits were successfully settled in favor of the applicant. One thing to note is we do hear about landlords straight out refusing Section 8 vouchers and refusing to rent to people who are getting services, financial aid from an agency. And this is definitely illegal under fair housing law here in Oregon. So if you hear about this, definitely reach out to us and let us know. Then we have sexual orientation and gender identity. And this means that who you're attracted to or how you identify should never come into question and not be a factor in any sort of housing transaction. And Oregon had this as a protected class before it became a federal mandate. Some other cities or different regions have identified additional protected classes. So like Multnomah County has occupation as a protected class, which means that your job or where you get your income from is protected. But here in Deschutes County, we do not have any additional protected classes. So the beautiful thing is that all of these laws allow really cover all of us and all of our identities, no matter how we show up. And all of us, can be supported by these laws. Here at the Fair Housing Council of Oregon, our Education and Outreach Department provides fair housing trainings to groups across the state. So we do a lot of training of landlords and property management groups, different shelter providers, maybe senior housing providers, letting people know about what their responsibilities are under the Fair Housing Act and best practices to avoid liability. We also train groups of renters and housing consumers, social service providers, to let people know how to recognize housing discrimination. So another part of that too is educating jurisdictions and trying to disseminate that knowledge so that you all have the power and advocacy to support people when you hear about issues coming up. We also do presentations to community members, giving statements at town halls and city council meetings, and do our best to work with cities and counties as much as we can to educate them about their fair housing responsibilities. Although in City of Bend, they have a pretty powerful fair housing effort, so that's pretty incredible. We have also a ton of other educational materials and guidebooks available both on our website, and if people contact me, I can get those sent to you as well. And this is really, I just wanted to give kind of some background about what we do, about fair housing laws, things like that. And before sharing about this community advisory group, we have a regional community advisory committee across the whole state, and we meet quarterly to identify and address barriers to fair housing specific to each region. So this is one of the big reasons that Andres invited me to come share with you all today. My hope is to get more city representation, and would love to have a representative from ATREC join us to further this discussion. The main intention of this group is to create strong working relationships between the Fair Housing Council of Oregon and different CAG members who are community advocates or part of groups and organizations, jurisdictions who provide support to protected classes and provide housing or can be an advocate for them. So I have CAG members who are across many different groups. One of the other big intentions of the community advisory group is to help identify and address common barriers that community members are currently facing when attempting to get into or stay in stable housing. So Melissa also talked about some of those big barriers, and yes, that is really helpful for us to help identify barriers to housing choice and affordable housing, inclusive communities, things like that. And this information really focuses our work so we can provide educational materials and training to the folks that need it most. And I think that this is really one of the most important things about the CAG, which is that these conversations inform our grant reporting so that we can continue doing locally relevant work in the community. We don't want to be educating people or doing work that doesn't feel like it's relevant to the current needs. So if one of you are open to joining, our next meeting is May 20th from 2 to 3:30 p.m. And I can send more information about that. Connecting with us, you can call with fair housing questions as they arise, or send an email is probably best. We can't offer specific legal advice. We can talk about fair housing laws in very broad terms and give input on different situations. We do have some folks on our enforcement side, actually, and our education side, who speak Spanish. But other than that, we also have translation services that we work with. So it can be an advocate in that way too. I always suggest reaching out directly to me or one of our other representatives who can hopefully help get your questions addressed as quickly as possible. Our enforcement team currently is quite slammed, so it's best to try to get your questions answered through our education team first. This is me. I am a white female with bangs. I use she, her pronouns. And yeah, let me know if you have any further questions. I really appreciate the opportunity to share this with you all today.
Thank you so much, Emily. So appreciated everything that you had to say. I will personally be very happy to come and see what you're doing, and hopefully I'll talk to you soon.
Lovely. Thank you.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions?
I have a question. Cameron Fisher, she, her. So I thought that was great to learn about more. Thank you, Emily. I am looking for some clarification. So the Fair Housing Council of Central Oregon does not collaborate directly with City of Bend currently. Is that the case?
To my understanding, it's not a direct collaboration, and this is Andres Portela. To my understanding, it's not a direct collaboration. However, they do lean on each other's expertise.
Okay, so this is just kind of informational.
So the reason why we asked folks to come in is Fair Housing Month. I think Emily had mentioned that in her description, and as well as Melissa had talked about it in her presentation. This was to open it up as we talk about housing, to look at ways we can connect better with community. The ask that was given from Fair Housing Council was to have an HREC member be a part of the community advisory group. That can be an important part to bring the protected classes, which are the mandate of HREC. Those protected classes, bringing those conversations back into this space to have our ear on the ground.
Is there potential for them to collaborate with the City of Bend directly, or is that?
So
I can speak to that briefly. Oh, go ahead, Andres.
Oh, yeah, I should be asking Emily, I'm sorry.
So as city staff, I'll be sitting in those meetings as well. So the hope is to have an HREC member as a part of that. Myself and a few others will be sitting a part of that meeting.
Okay.
All I'll add is that, in the past, we have, I know previous members of the Fair Housing Council of Oregon have come and been a part of City of Bend's Welcoming Week, have collaborated with the folks in the Affordable Housing Department, working with Rachel and Melissa, and have definitely had continual conversations. Andreas and I have met several times, and those are the current collaborations, but would always love more.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jeff Kitchens, I guess my question would be, we had obviously the great presentation by Melissa from the Affordable Housing, I think it's the committee or council, and then obviously, Emily, thank you very much for your presentation. Are these two efforts connected? I guess this is kind of going maybe in line with what Commissioner Cameron was asking. We have the Fair Housing Council of Central Oregon, we have the Affordable Housing Coordinator with the city and the committee. Are they connected? Is there a collaboration occurring for those?
So in the two.
Yes. Yeah.
Go ahead,
Go ahead.
sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, we have had meetings and have been keeping each other in the loop with the work that, or the city, the affordable housing folks have been keeping me in the loop about the work that they're doing. And we get together and have spoken about the overlaps and the different ways that, potentially my role and my organization at Fair Housing Council of Oregon can help and come in and do the specific targeted trainings and education to folks that maybe they are seeing coming up more in their analysis of impediments. The analysis of impediments is something that the city is doing separately. So I'm not a part of that, but there is definitely overlap since it is both fair housing related and focused here locally in Bend. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, are there any other questions for Emily? This is Linda, by the way. Are there any questions for Emily? Thank you so much. We so appreciate your time, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you all very much.
Okay, so we will move on to our standing items, community events and updates. Commissioners, fellows, do we have any upcoming events that we want to discuss or share? I guess not at this point. I think we're all still trying to collect our wits.
This is Commissioner Jeff Kitchens, he, him. I would say that we are less than a couple weeks away from May, and that is Asian American and Pacific Islander month. And there's usually some events that are hosted in Central Oregon. So each month, almost all the months, calendars of the year, within the calendar of the year has some special emphasis tied to diversity, equity, inclusion, or accessibility. So, yeah, I know that May will have a number of events that will be coming up. There will also be events associated, I know in Central Oregon, associated with Memorial Day. And so there'll be a number of those events to honor our veterans and those that have lost their lives, protecting our country. So I just encourage us to look out for those that are going to be coming up. There's a myriad of different sources that'll provide opportunities for us to see what's coming out. You just kind of got to look through social media.
Thank you so much. This is Linda, and when is welcoming week? When is welcoming week coming up?
Welcoming week is the week of September 14th. There are some important dates. Andres Portela.
Okay, so that's always.
So September 14th is the beginning of welcoming week. There will be a meeting May 24th for folks who have traditionally hosted those events. And so there'll also be a press release about the announcement of funding for community based groups to apply for funding for welcoming week events.
Okay. And I guess my other question is, like, I would like to get a clear sense of what the opportunities are this summer to bring HREC to. And also have like that be kind of an opportunity to highlight the incredibly diverse cultures that are in our town now. I imagine mariachis, for example, or some djembe drums, or drums from our indigenous music and food, to try to highlight and give an opportunity for the cultures that live here, the various cultures that live here, to bring their lives and their music and their food into a space to share it with us. I would like to kind of see about where we can fit an HREC event, or where HREC could fit into events that are already happening in the summer, and see us get out there in the community. And just, I'll help do that if you'd like.
Right on there too.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know last year we, sorry, this is Councilor Jeff Kitchens. Last year, we did have members come out and support the city with their booth at Pride Day, or the Pride event for Central Oregon, so that's a really key one. It'll be important for us, and then if there's other events that the city's doing where there's opportunities to share the message, if folks are available, it'd be great to be able to participate. I don't know what those look like yet.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's okay, this is Jackie. May 18th is COCC's annual Salmon Bake. So that is on the Bend campus from 11 to 3. That is free and open to the public. There's gonna be a lot of really great people and things happening there. Some native owned salmon, fishers, the Brighams, I think I'm saying it correctly, out of Cascade Locks, is providing their salmon. And there is gonna be awesome dancing and music and really fun things happening. So again, free and open to public, May 18th. And then Juneteenth celebration is coming up around the corner, and we are still in need of volunteers. It's happening the weekend of June 15th and 16th. And it happens to be COCC and OSU graduation weekend. So I think that's affecting a lot of our volunteers. So if anybody's available, we are still very much looking for folks, and that can just be found on the Central Oregon Juneteenth website. And also just come and enjoy the event.
Okay. Is there anything else?
I just want to say that I included a slide full of some events that are happening within our community. I'll share those back with all of us in the later presentation shared. Additionally, I wanted to share Gender Hive is looking for a program director for gender affirming healthcare and support services in Central Oregon. Just making that little plug that they're doing the work, and it's how we support them.
Okay, sounds like it's gonna be an exciting summer. I'm looking forward to it. I really am. So moving on then to our agenda setting and bike rack. Are there any suggested items for the next HREC meeting? I'm assuming that we can, if we come up with them over the next 3 weeks or so, we can
Reach out directly. to
reach
them.
out, yeah. Not right now? Digesting. Yeah,
I just wanted to, Andres Portela, around to him. I just wanted to highlight some of the community events that we went to over the last month, and hopefully we can continue to highlight some of these throughout our work and our equity updates. Equity staff and community engagement staff went to Lakespur Park, Lakespur Community Center, where about 125 community members, specifically targeting Spanish and English outreach, just took part in a resource fair, in which was a very beautiful community gathering. A lot of the language spoken was in Spanish, which kind of caught me out of my depth, but I tried my best. And I was so grateful to have staff member Kathy standing right next to me doing the work and creating an amazing art piece. And so I just wanted to share a piece of joy that happened over the last month.
okay. And Councilor Perkins, Minute for 10, thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you. Megan Perkins, she, her, blonde, blue eyes, pinkish sweater. Happy, I just want to say, first of all, that I'm really proud to be here as your council liaison and be sitting in front of the 6 of you and those of you who couldn't be here today. It really showed, by showing up, it shows that ugliness does not win. And thank you for showing up today in some really rough circumstances. And I just want to also say that I'm really proud to work with the incredible equity team. You're just exceptional people, and you were there giving people support when you needed support yourself. So thank you. Thank you. And I know I speak for council too when I say that we're just really grateful for your service. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things from our last meeting. Last meeting, we had a focus on the environment and climate. And we also got to see some early designs for the Hawthorne Bridge, which is pretty cool. It's not very often you get to help design a bridge, and that'll be coming to the community. So you too can help design a real flagship bridge for our community. We talked about the council compensation and how that the committee presented all the really hard work they've done on future pay for councilors and for our mayor. And we got to talk about the stipend program and heard the adjustments that the Human Rights and Equity Commission had suggested, and all agreed to them. Thought they were really great ways to make the program even better in the future. On May 1st, which is our next meeting next Wednesday, we are during our work session at 5 o'clock, we are going to be talking about supplier diversity and community benefit programs. And remind me, Andres, have you talked about that here yet?
We have yet to talk about that.
Okay, well, I would highly, this is some incredible work that that a lot of city staff has been a part of, including the equity department, to really look at when we're doing work in the community, whether it's building a road or having food for a meeting. Let's talk about how we can really step above and say we want to make sure that we're including people that are not normally included in this process, whether it's businesses or companies, and also how can we ensure that when people are working that they're working for fair wages and the community benefits that will help them. And so that will be at 5 o'clock on the 1st. We're also going to be having our public hearing, finally, it seems, on SDCs. This has been a very, very long process. So that'll be the time for people to have their comments be on the record at that meeting. And Wanted to say, for those of you who are interested in attending the next Affordable Housing Committee meeting, I believe that it's the 8th of May. And I highly recommend that if you have time, which I know that time is limited, that the last meeting was a really excellent meeting that really, a lot of the things that you were talking about tonight, they also really got into and had a really incredible conversation. I learned a lot from that last meeting. The 15th of May, which is our next meeting, one of the things that I wanted to highlight was at a work session, we're going to be talking about the memorandum of understanding for citizen assembly. And I'm sure you probably wouldn't remember, but Josh Burgess, who's sort of running this, came and he did a public comment a couple times at the Human Rights and Equity Commission meetings. And basically what they're doing is this incredible, huge community engagement project. And it's something that they've done all over Europe and just in limited capacities here in the United States. But basically they pick a topic, the community picks a topic, and they literally send out lottery. They do a lottery they, while also ensuring that they're being, demographically sound and that they're not just hearing from, the same people. And basically the people come in and for a few days learn about a topic and then come up with a series of recommendations. And I'm really pleased to tell you that the first topic they're going to do is youth homelessness. And so it's that they're looking to do the lottery, I think, this summer, and actually do the citizens assembly in the fall. And they are, especially due to this important topic, they're going to make sure that they're giving what they're calling golden tickets to people that have lived experience, so that they can make sure that there will be people with lived experience in the room. So it's a really, really exciting new civic engagement thing for our community. And they really hope to make it a sustainable model so that they can continue to address topics like that. The other thing on the 15th is that we will be looking at the funding recommendations that came, the CDBG funding recommendations that came from the Affordable Housing Committee. And we are going to be talking about our tax incentive programs, sort of looking at them holistically and start thinking about what are the things that we really want to incentivize through these programs. Another two things. One is that on June 5th, we're going to be talking about our tree code, if that's something of interest to you. And we will not be meeting on June 19th because that is Juneteenth. And so for the first time ever, Ian, we are meeting on a Thursday so our meeting will be on the 20th and not the 19th. I think that's it. If there's any, I don't ran through that. If there's anything else.
Just for clarification, because I don't know if everybody knows the acronyms, you mentioned that the public hearing for SDC is on the first.
Yes, thank you. System development charges.
Thank you.
Yes. And I know I believe it was December or something like that you received a brief on that.
And if someone wanted to get involved in the community engagement efforts, is there a contact person or?
For a citizen assembly?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to, I can share that, the contact information for that.
Okay.
And I know that I've been really impressed so far with how much they want to really go and talk to all facets of our community and make sure that people feel part of this.
I'm really excited about this idea. This
Yeah,
is,
me
as
too.
far as I'm concerned, and we did this in Minneapolis, actually.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
That's cool.
well, in the form of a sort of a game of Monopoly. It was a planning
Oh,
game.
yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, but we discovered that the first, really one of the first steps is in changing attitudes and changing things like quote unquote NIMBYism and all the other isms. Is to really just ask the people.
Mhm.
Ask the people. The thing is, a community belongs to everyone. And as far as the individual goes, it's hard to feel like you belong
Mhm.
and without a feeling of ownership.
Mhm.
It's hard to gain a attitude or feeling of ownership if you're not contributing your voice
Mhm.
and you don't see where you can. and if you're not being heard. So to me, the first step, one of the very first steps in building a safer and more rational and kinder Bend is to ask us. And, you know, let the community feel what that's like to be asked and to be listened to and to see that and to see the result of that process. That's in my mind how this becomes a conversation. That's how the conversation becomes a story, and that's how it becomes a reality for the community. Is what I've seen.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you so much for all of that.
You.
A recap, so I would be very much appreciated, so that we can see, go back and see like, where is it possible to get involved and who to contact.
Cassandra. This is Cassandra. Just a note of record. I just wanted to let commissioners know that Commissioner Jasmine Wilder has been online for the duration, did not attend for the portion of the attendance announcement, but she's been present. So just for the record.
Oh, yay, Jasmine, hi. This is Linda. Okay, is there anything else?
Yes. Carolyn Peacock Biggs, she, her. Just for clarity's sake and, you know, just let me ask you a question. I know that we are not doing community via online as far as having the voice online. You get to type in your comments online. You get to type in your comments by noon and they'll consider and read them. Are we still allowing community, such as people that are sitting here, that's been sitting here all throughout the whole meeting, a time that they can have a voice? Or is, I remember you saying something about you have to do both or something like that.
Yes, and Linda, you were not the only one that didn't introduce themselves earlier. I didn't either. I didn't either. You're not alone.
So cool.
Ian Lighthizer, he, him, I'm a lawyer at the city attorney's office. Excuse me. I am a white man wearing a collared shirt, which is normal, but this one is kind of red, white, and blue check pattern. So a little nicer than what I sometimes wear. So to your question, yes, I think we did touch on this at the last meeting. Public meetings, or pardon me, meetings of governing bodies of public bodies, which this commission is, are governed by state law, public meetings law. And that law has multiple requirements as to how these meetings have to happen, how they have to be noticed, where they can happen, that they have to be accessible. And during the pandemic, there was some pivoting that happened. I'm sure most of us remember, to how pretty much everyone did business in one way or another. And one thing that government had to figure out was how are we going to conduct these public meetings in a remote environment? So there were a lot of quick changes to deal with the situation in March of 2020. And then there were legislative changes that followed as sort of the law started to catch up with changes that we were making in the name of public health. Some of those changes included amendments to the public meetings law that now mean that if a governing body of a public body holds a public meeting like this one and offers an opportunity for people in person to provide public testimony, they also have to offer an opportunity at that meeting for people to offer public testimony remotely. That can be on the phone, that can be via Zoom, that can be via other platforms that I'm not thinking of. So what that means is it is difficult, and I'll say probably not really practical and maybe even impossible to allow people who show up to offer public testimony if we don't make that opportunity available also to people remotely, on phone, via Zoom, etc. So decision was made for this meeting to not offer an in-person public testimony opportunity. That means nobody is entitled to offer public comment or testimony online either. That doesn't mean that's the way that HREC is always going to do it. That's probably a discussion to have with staff about how does this commission want to handle public comment in the future. There are a lot of permutations of that, but given changes in the law, it's not really possible to say if you show up, you can offer public comment or testimony, but we're not going to make that opportunity available to people who might want to do so remotely. So that's probably not the answer you wanted to hear, but there is an issue there. And I will say, and sorry, one more thing. This meeting was, yeah, there always is with me, isn't there? This meeting, the agenda was built in a certain way. The agenda for this meeting and the notice for this meeting included an opportunity, as Andres went through, for people to submit written comment, some of which was read today. So that was the way that this meeting was put together. Disappointing though that might be if anybody's here wanting to speak in person. Now, I will say, sorry, one more thing. That certainly does not mean that after the meeting concludes that HREC commissioners can't talk to people, that people who may be here can't speak to HREC commissioners and offer whatever input or comments they want. But technically speaking, it isn't a part of the meeting agenda, and it's difficult for us to do without making online comment available, which I don't think we did for this meeting. Again, could change, but that's how we're doing it this time.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Okay.
Cameron Fisher, she, her.
Yes.
So what's the plan going forward? Are we going to discuss this or what's next?
Great question. I have a lot of thoughts on how to handle public comment, what some of the options are, honestly, what some of the limits and restrictions are. That's probably a longer presentation than anyone has interest or time for tonight. I do think city staff are discussing what are the best ways to do this going forward. At some level, that's probably going to need to involve chairs and vice chairs, at least of our various advisory bodies, because I will say this, the public meetings law is it's basically a public attendance law. It makes these meetings accessible and open to people. It does not include a public participation requirement unless there is something specific happening that some other law says, for example, has to include a public hearing. But most of what our advisory groups do aren't subject to those kind of requirements. So that's a long way of saying public comment isn't required. It's discretionary, generally speaking, whether the body is going to allow it. There were some decisions made in the aftermath of what happened last month to maybe not be as open with allowing it and as free and easy with allowing it as we had been in the past. But that's a reaction to a situation, and it may not be the right long-term solution, because having public interactive opportunities is a part of what really any advisory body is interested in. Nothing about what I'm saying prevents anybody from submitting written comment or testimony to staff that can be distributed to HREC. That can happen offline. That doesn't have to happen during a public meeting. If somebody writes into the HREC or writes into staff and they have public comment, it can be longer than 2 or 3 minutes. It can be as much as they want. That can be shared and distributed, but the public meetings law does govern how we have to deal with things in a meeting. So long-term, I don't know what the plan is. I think it probably is something we need to figure out. And there's obviously, I would say, a role for members of the body to have some input in how they want public comment to work at their meeting. This is not just a staff decision that gets made.
Yeah, I just wanted clarity on, so it's not necessarily a city decision or this group's decision. Don't we have to kind of figure that out before the next meeting?
Well, so the nice thing about having a chair and a vice chair is, in theory, chair and the vice chair can work with staff to set an agenda for upcoming meetings, offer input, on how the meeting should work, what should be on the agenda, how public comment should work. That frankly should probably be part of the discussion. And different committees may have different approaches. You know, some committees may say, yeah, we want our public comment to work a certain way. Another advisory body may say, you know, we don't really think we need public comment, at least not for this meeting, or we want it to work a different way, or we have this concern, but not that concern. So I think there are some questions we probably need to work through in collaborating with leadership on our various advisory groups about whether we want flexibility for particular advisory groups to manage and handle public comment in their own way within whatever we think some of the legal boundaries are, or whether we want standardization and a standard policy that chairs and vice chairs and staff liaisons to our advisory bodies can use as a baseline that they all share. I don't know what the right answer is, but I think there are some questions that we need to figure out.
Great, thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
There might be one more.
Carolyn Peacock Biggs, I just would like to go on record by saying we service multi-generations of people. They bring their children. You know, there are young elementary schools that come in here. There's middle schools, there's high schools, there's college students, there's middle-aged. We're not just teaching for today. And to have representation and for them to learn how to speak and govern. This is a multi-generational thing that we're doing here. This is not just today's agenda to make today's agenda work for today. That little girl that spoke last week and her father taught her that her family stood up for equal rights for her family. That meant something. To me, that meant that's one less person that has these binders on. And she grew up knowing that everybody has the right to be equal. How will you expect for the multi-generation to get it? Because words don't teach. Participation teaches. So I just want to go on record just by saying that it's not just us today. We're an example for the youth. You know, you don't get to make a statement and change the dynamic of our city. This is the place where we teach our children about equality. And we just can't sit back and say, well, okay, well, that's just my take on it. And this is an operation that is just designed for multi-generations. And I'm proud when I saw that man bring his daughters. He was proud. He videotaped it. It was beautiful. To take that away from our community and from our children, I think it'd be a disservice. So I just want to go on record for saying that. And then we can talk about what that looks like later. And if the laws of the powers that be still say we have to do it, then we're on it, but we won't like it.
I want to be clear. I'm not a power that is. But, and I hear that. I mean, I can tell you what the law requires, and sort of there is a little bit, there's flexibility to allow or not. There is less flexibility to, when we're talking about public comment, there is less flexibility in the law to allow in a certain way, but not another way. So that's where we are. But I think that discussion of whether to allow or not is a lot of what you're speaking to. And I think what staff and liaisons and advisory body members and leadership will need to grapple with is weighing the benefits of all the things you mentioned with, you know, maybe the risks that opening up participation is opening up participation to perhaps all kinds of people. And that's, democracy is messy, but that's kind of what we need to figure out.
We're not here to make people comfortable. That's not why we're here, because this is an uncomfortable subject. We're here to make a difference. And sometimes it's not comfortable, and that's okay.
So I have just a general, it's a process question. I'm just curious, so I can kind of get my brain wrapped around things for future discussions. Having had the benefit of participating, supporting, facilitating, setting up, I don't even know all the words, for almost 20 years now, public meetings in a lot of different venues in a lot of different ways and seeing a lot of different things. One thing I have seen, and I'm curious if this is allowed per the laws for city, is I have seen situations where pre-pandemic, it was all in person, post-pandemic, it was virtual and in person. Those that wanted to speak and provide public comment had to submit something ahead of
Mhm.
time. And they had to submit it in such a way that it was very clear what they were going to speak on, how they were going to speak on it. And then as time allowed, those comments could either be read if we didn't have time for all the public comments, or those that had provided those summaries ahead of time were allowed to speak. Is that an option for us?
I think there are some things that, I keep using this dumb phrase, governing body of a public body, but yes, there are some things that the body, the committee, the commission, the council, whatever it is, can do in terms of process. You know, you can speak, but you need to register. You need to register by a certain time. You need to provide a certain amount of information or a certain kind of information as part of your registration if you want to speak. There are protocols that a body can adopt. Now, when or if those protocols start extending to managing or controlling the contribution or the testimony or the comment based on content or viewpoint or what somebody says they're going to say or what we think somebody might say based on the information that we perhaps lawfully require them to submit, that's where it gets dicier. But you know, you have, for example, an HREC meeting starts at 4:30. There's going to be public comment if you're in person or online, because in my opinion, that's what the law requires if you're going to allow in-person comment. But if you want to speak either in person or online, you've got to register whatever we say that means by 3:30, you know, an hour before the meeting or an hour and a half before the meeting. And you've got to provide a name and contact information and a brief description of what you intended maybe to speak to. So those are things that some other bodies have adopted to try to manage public comment. And I won't say control content or viewpoint, but just to try to make the meeting work efficiently. You know, it's good to know how many people want to speak. It's good to know perhaps what people want to speak on, because maybe there's information that they can be provided if there's a topic that they're interested in. So there are reasons to do that that have to do with meeting management. I think if somebody, and I'm not suggesting that this group is interested in that, but if there are reasons to do that have to do with controlling or managing the content or viewpoint of the speech that gets presented, it gets, I won't say questionable, but it gets, then it comes to the lawyers and we start weighing in on what we think. And that's just something we have to do because we've got to apply the law, even if, you know, as you said, it's our job. Our job is to provide information so you can be comfortable making decisions, but it's not really to facilitate making people feel comfortable.
And I'll just share my experience in using that model is it is in no way meant to inhibit or control content. What it does do very intentionally is it requires folks to be basically share who they are and what they're going to say. So there still will be people with passion. They still may say things that we don't want to always hear every day and may not be comfortable. But for those that wish to just who aren't necessarily interested in sharing public comments and more in terms of just intentionally disrupting, it tends to cut that down by 99% is what I have found. And it is a very helpful way to manage a meeting. So it's just a suggestion for us to consider. And I was curious if it was something that we could even consider.
I think it is something that can be explored. And I don't disagree with you. My take is that some people are opportunistic in their need to disrupt and they're less interested in providing meaningful input, whether it's critical or not. It's, you know, it's like the unlocked car in the driveway is a better opportunity target for somebody than one that's locked. So might not be a best analogy, but I think it can make a difference.
Okay, Carolyn, I would like to say, I so appreciate you, your understanding, your sentiment, your ability to articulate really hard things. And I'm so grateful that you came back. And this is everything you said is why we need you, and it's why we need you, big, beautiful red coat. Okay? And, if I could, stick my neck out, Andreas, tell me if you don't want to or not, but a couple days ago, I had a really nice conversation with that man. And I was feeling pretty discouraged, and, he lifted me up. He lifted me up by reminding me of all of the things that this commission has actually accomplished this year. And I was pretty emotional by the time I got off the phone, because I had been really stressed out. Over my concerns that, I don't see any work coming out of this. I don't see any actual kind of like words I can hang on to or deeds I can hang on to. I said, okay, we're making progress. And on today I said, hey, whoa. And he said, actually, no, we've actually done a lot. So if you want to take us out, with all of the, give the rest of us what you gave to me and kind of celebrate, for a minute, what we have actually been able to accomplish. I think that would be like the best way ever and to close us out. Does anybody agree?
Thanks for putting me on the spot.
Payback for putting me here.
Okay, I appreciate that.
So talk about being on the spot. I haven't done Robert's Rules of Orders. I don't know, I'm not saying how many years.
Yeah.
So on the spot, no, man.
So I appreciate that. Andres Portela, pronouns he, him. I think I want to point to the most recent work that we did on the stipend program, and those recommendations went to council last council. As y'all remember, we did the 2 design conversations that really took the feedback of the survey that was done for all advisory bodies. And we came up with some pretty concrete suggestions. In that, we're going to continue the program, and that we're going to better define how we do the program. We're going to figure out how to get money in hands of commissioners in the most easiest and simplest ways. And we couldn't have done that without ATREC really just leading that work, and telling us as city staff, how do we do that effectively? And so that was part of what I reminded Linda of. I think there are, during the last meeting, even with the disruption, I'd kind of gone down a list, and it was kind of hard to see the forest for the trees. I felt like I was on autopilot a little bit, but I had a whole list of the things that we've done, and I'm just grateful that y'all continue to show up. So in that, someone can motion to adjourn.
If anyone would like to motion to adjourn,
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
I'll second. And we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thanks, Linda, for leading.